Hello, and welcome to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we educate, inspire, and guide you through divorce and beyond because divorce happens and then we start fresh. And we are here today with one of our amazing experts, Jenn Wert. Jenn Wert is a parent coach. Jenn, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Olivia. I'm a parent coach, a conscious parent coach. So I work with families across America who have kiddos ages 2 to 12. So the preschool, elementary school years. And I help them work on prioritizing connection and authenticity in their relationships so that during those foundational years, they are really laying the tracks
Mm.
for a trusting and open relationship with their children so that they enter adolescence with more ease and more connection.
Which is so important, especially when it comes to divorce, right? Because so much of divorce within the family system is restructuring and figuring out new strategies, which is why we're super excited to have you here today. So, one of the topics I was really excited to have you on for is really exploring those conscious parenting techniques that can help you keep that connection strong, right, with your child during these kind of like really transitional times for a family, especially, with divorce or I mean, I know whatever you say today could really be applied to so many different topics. But speaking specifically about divorce, what would you say, Jenn, if a parent is listening to this and, we know with divorce, the parent themselves are going through so much stuff, but you don't want to leave your kids behind. They know what's happening in the household, right?
Mhm.
So, what would you say to kind of kick off like this conscious parenting strategy of keeping that connection strong with your kiddo during this time?
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate the question because we are always, as adults, managing and navigating our own lives while we are parenting, right, simultaneously. And when we add divorce with the restructure and the emotional toll it
Mhm.
takes, there's just a whole nother layer on top of both
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
um, intentions and projects. And so, in keeping connection here front of mind through divorce and in setting up a new rhythm, a new home environment, a new normal,
Mm.
it's really important to be intentional about the language that you use with your children around
Mm.
the divorce, around the this next chapter looking forward, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time being really authentic with them,
Right.
developmentally appropriate, in a developmentally appropriate ways. But I do think that it's very helpful to realize, as you alluded to, that the kids know, they know so much more than you've told them.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
Kids are so wise and intuitive, and
Yep.
they watch and take in everything. So it's not, some people think it's best to try to protect them or not share parts of what's actually happening. And this is a pretty general comment, right? But in my coaching, I find the more we get comfortable with being authentic with our children
Mm.
and naming things that might not be
Yeah.
comfortable to name, the more real our relationships are. And really also, instead of focusing on what we're telling them, really bring in the light on to asking them questions, right?
Mm.
Asking them what they're wondering about, asking them how they're doing, asking them what they might like about the change or what they're nervous about or
Mhm.
is they don't like about it, right? Inviting in the getting comfortable in the uncomfortable together, parent child.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. I love that, Jen. Okay, so many things to ask you here. I love that. I can say as somebody that went through this,
Mm.
when you go through a divorce with your kids, they see you in a different light, right? Maybe for the first time, right? You can't really hide when you're in a house with your kids so much when you're going through this stuff. So I love that you're saying that that authenticity really fosters that deeper relationship with your kids, because I felt that very strongly. Like, my kids know me in a different way than they ever would because they lived through that with me.
Mm.
So, what are some like language choices or approaches to conversations that you can have? And it doesn't, right, like you said, it has to be, age appropriate. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty, right? They don't need to know I'm calling the divorce lawyer and this, blah, blah, blah. But
No.
like, what can you start to like approach kind of this time, these conversations? Let's just take, I'm gonna just snapshot it. A lot of people listening to this probably have kids, I would say between 7 and 12 years old, right? So
Mm.
kind of looking at that age group, how would you approach these conversations?
Yeah, well, a couple of things come to mind. I got goosebumps when you shared that because I can relate. I've been a single mom since my daughter was one. So I've
Yeah.
been through this, and at
Yep.
very young age when it's a little less common, right? So I've
Yeah.
been at this for a very long time in terms of my own parenting and then supporting other parents in this for almost 4 years now. I want to say two things in response to your question. One is that it's really important to hold the other parent um, in a positive light,
Yes.
right? Because your relationship with them it matters much less than your
Yeah.
children's relationship with them, actually.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what's so hard in the adulting
Yes.
that we have to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Because we have to notice when we're triggered that our own stuff comes out about our relationship with um, their other parent. And
Yeah.
really that's secondary. What our job is to hold their relationship with their other parent as just as important as
Mhm.
their relationship with us.
Mhm.
That takes real maturity, right?
Yes.
Um, and no, it's self-awareness, really, which
Yep.
is what I really work with parents on. When can I catch myself sort of triggered and maybe
Mhm.
saying things, using
Yeah.
language that's derogatory or judgy, because they feel all of that. Again, they're no dummies. They are
Yep.
tuned in. And so we want to be really aware and catch ourselves. Say, "Oh, you know what? Your relationship with that parent in our heads or out
Yep.
loud is super important for you to have and to hold. And it's going to be different than your relationship with me, right?"
Yeah.
So, really just naming that again and again, checking yourself with your language. Is there
Mhm.
judgment seeping out, or are
Mhm.
my own feelings or hurt, is that hurt woven into my conversations about
Mm.
their relationships? Because really we have to separate
Yeah.
theirs from ours. So
Yeah.
that's the first piece in our
Yeah.
language, in our conversations, in our energy.
Yep.
And that takes, as you know, a lot of self-awareness and presence.
It does. It does. Which leads me to another question for you is, especially as moms, I'm gonna say, we take on a lot of the emotional, right, brunt of everything in our children's lives. So what happens if our kid, is struggling to connect with us because they feel like we're the ones to blame, or that, like,
Mm.
and how do we not take that as a parent so sensitively, right? It's like, oh, like, no, this is going to be the better thing for the family, but it doesn't feel like it right now, right? So I don't know. What would you say in that situation? Is that something that's obviously something the parent has to work on their side? But what happens? Like, how do we not let our own ego get in the way of our connection with our child?
Well, there's the ultimate question of parents.
Just that little casual question, Jen.
I mean, this is what the second part of what I was going to say in the last question. So it's a perfect follow up. Our job is to, as we hold boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Is to validate and empathize with our children's experience and
Mm.
emotion. Those go hand in
Mhm.
hand. So it
Mhm.
is really our job. Their experience, I guarantee, and their emotions are not the same as ours. And so again, there's that little bit of separation. It's funny. I talk with parents about this all the time. We have to separate almost to connect more.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
very, it's a dance that we do to not be enmeshed or projecting, right? We have to
Yeah.
allow for our children to have
Well,
their own
right, it's
experience.
like when we give birth to them, right? We have to let them be born so we can connect with them, right?
Yes, it starts from birth, right? That
Yeah.
letting go, to be
Yeah.
really, really present with them. So honoring their experience. Again, back to the question asking. How are we listening to them? How are we making
Mm,
room for their emotions, right? We have enough on our own going on, and yet we're called as parents to also make room and allow for our kids to have their own emotions,
yeah.
their own experiences, and to listen to them,
Yeah.
just validate them, not try to convince them of another thing or tell them, convince them it's going to be better. Not
Yep.
really our job. It's
Mm,
just to create a space in our home and with us where all of their feelings are allowed, right? Even the
mhm.
really uncomfortable ones, and let
Yeah.
them know that it's safe to have all those feelings. I think one thing that we're all working on, but especially when a family is um, separating and going through divorce, is there's a mix of emotions, right? There's
Yeah.
curiosity and giddiness about another house, right? I mean,
Yep.
and really grief and loss and sadness about
Mhm.
letting go of
Mhm.
an old way. And those are just two, but it's a
Yeah.
big mixing pot of emotions. And we need to really allow for this in ourselves and
Mhm.
in each of our kiddos.
Yeah.
That's where the
Yeah.
growth really begins. Yeah.
I love that. So before we let you go, if you have a kid that, when you say ask them questions and really listen, that's not gonna look the same, right, for every relationship. So, what are some ways that we can connect with our kids that isn't just a traditional, like, "Let's sit down on the bed and, we're across the kitchen table." Like, I'm sure you work with a lot of parents in a lot of different situations that have to connect in a lot of ways. I know, like, for our family, it's, driving and listening to music, or sometimes just, like, watching TV together, like, things will come up, right? So, if a parent's listening to this and they're like, "Look, Jen, I tried to talk to them and they're not getting it, they're not listening." What are some other ways you can connect?
Yeah. Or they might ask them questions and the kids say, "Oh, I'm fine.
Right,
Nothing."
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there are an infinite number of ways to connect. And it's not um, going to look always like it does in the movies, holding hands and skipping down the shoreline,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yep.
It's like you alluded to, it's much more fluid than that and
Mm,
personal and messy. And so the trick is being really present enough to notice when connection is happening. So we can't, it's about coming in without an agenda, coming
yeah,
into a time, even if you set aside 10 minutes a day, or if you have an hour on a weekend or whatever the time is, doesn't really matter. It's the
mm,
intention and the energy coming
right,
in without an agenda.
right.
That's hard
Yeah,
because we often go, it's going to look like this, and I need to have this answer, and then I
yeah,
want you to understand this, and then tie a bow. And mm-mm. It's
yep.
more slow and present than that. It's saying, I have an hour. What would you like to do? So letting them lead, co-collaborate on how to spend the
Mm,
time.
yeah.
Maybe they just want you to rub their feet, and they want to be watching something on their iPad while you're
So
rubbing their.
I just wanna be so I love what you're saying. So to be clear, Jen, what you're saying is you don't even have to talk about the issues at hand with them. This is just about the connection.
Yes.
Okay.
It's because often we can force conversations
Yeah.
when it's not the right moment. So it's slowing down enough to trust these
Mm,
these things will come up, and sensing when your kiddo feels open, feels connected. It's always connection first. And
mm,
then maybe there's a question. But the question must be open-ended, right?
interesting.
So
Yeah.
it allows for them to really expand. I'm wondering, this is a great way to start. I'm wondering how you're feeling about everything. Whew,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
open. And
Yeah.
then if they give you a little, you just say, stay real even, not hungry for more, but
Right.
even. Tell me
Mm,
more. Tell me more about that, honey.
Gosh, that's hard to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
is. It is, yeah.
There's so much I love so much of what you said because it really does get down to just, like, first reconnecting with your kid, right? And I think for a lot of families, especially in the very fast-paced suburban sports world, like, you kind of, float together, right? You're not really connecting together. And so this might be the first time for a lot of moms in a while, maybe since their kids were toddlers, that they really, like, sat down to be close to them or affectionate or, connect with them in a physical and emotional way. And so it might take some time. That's what you're saying. Like the conversations will come, but lead with the connection first.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
And
I love
sometimes
that.
we get, especially when we get a little fearful, right? When we're in divorce and going through transition,
Yeah.
and we can get a little 911. I need to have this conversation and
Yes.
check it off. And
Yes.
that's just not how relationship works, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
it's about
Oh, I
that
love that.
slowing down and trusting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I hope that everybody rewinds and listens to this a few times because I think that what you said really could apply, like we said, to any issue, right? Like whether it's your kid going to middle school, whether it's your kid dating or driving or friend issues, right? Whatever it is, it's not just divorce. But I love all of that. So Jen, how do you work with people and where do you work with people and what does that look like?
Yeah. So I work with people on Zoom. I coach parents on Zoom, again, across the country, parents of kiddos ages 2 to 12. And the way to work with me is to start by booking a one on one free consult. Go to my website,
Yep.
jennwert.com. Jen has two N's, JENNWERT.com. I think it'll be in the show notes,
It will
right?
be in the show notes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then jen.com/free dash consult. And let's hop on a call and talk about your family, what's happening with your
Mm,
family, talk about
mhm.
your parenting and your kiddos and see if it's a fit.
Yep.
And like you said a couple of minutes ago, it this kind of work, self-awareness, conscious parenting, it takes time, it takes practice. I still
Mm,
practice every day.
yep.
So I work with parents in a 3-month container, right? If we think
Okay.
it's a fit,
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
do is I get on their team and we are invested and committed to 3 months working together. I'm there for spot coaching between our sessions. In those 3 months,
Amazing.
we have up to 9 sessions. So you'll find all the details um, as you book your free consult with me, and I would love to meet with you and be of support. This is an area and I'm especially passionate about because I was going to say I've lived through it. I do live through it every
Mhm.
day
Mhm. Mhm.
as a single mom. So I'm eager to connect with you.
I love that so much. And of course, you can find more about Jen in the show notes. And we just appreciate you, Jen, and so much of this knowledge. And, like we say here at Fresh Starts, you have to build your support team of people that are going to, support you through this. And as a parent, you always think about your children first. And you have to remember, like, like we say, it's not the divorce that often breaks families apart in a way. It's the aftermath of the divorce, right? Divorce happens, right? As we know. But what can you do to rebuild that family structure and rebuild that connection? And so much of the work that you do is really essential for parents. So if you're listening to this, please get in touch with Jen. And Jen, before we let you go, if somebody is listening to this and they're a parent going through a divorce, what would be something that you would say to them to encourage them to keep going?
Mm. I would encourage them to prioritize coming back to and sinking in and listening to themselves
I love
again
that.
and again and again.
I love that.
And that's what we want to teach our kids to do, right?
Yeah,
So we have to do it first.
absolutely. Got to put our oxygen mask on first, right? Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for being here, Jen.
Thanks, Olivia.